Welcome back to Lessons from Last Time. I am your host, Ken Perry, and my co-host, Kirk Faulkner. Kirk, good to see you again.
Good to be here. Always good to be here.
Let's talk about Michael Regan like he's not sitting across from us.
We can't do that because he's such a presence. It would be almost impossible to talk about him like he's not here because A, he's here, and B, he's a presence, and he's got a great bunch of stuff to share with us.
Should we just invite him in then?
Go ahead.
Hey, Michael Regan, thanks for joining us.
I just can't believe you guys knew that Led Zeppelin Presence is my favorite Zeppelin album. So
Ooh,
we're already off to a good start.
Is it
well
really?
played.
Most people go Zeppelin 2. They want, Heartbreaker,
four.
A Whole Lot of Love. They'll go for, Black Dog, maybe The Stairway to Heaven. I'm a Presence guy. Let's go Achilles' Last Stand.
All right.
Wow.
I think it's amazing that you just said that. And just before this, we talked about Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five off camera. You've got a range of music that you listen to.
We're working through it in therapy, but yes, that's a true statement. I genuinely love music, and I'm not really drawn to be isolated to a genre. As long as it's really good, I'm probably a big fan.
Though it's blasphemous to mention whatever it is you just said in Led Zeppelin in the same sentence.
I don't think it is.
Not according to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They have inducted both.
Trailblazers. They were absolute, ahead of their time, amazing, trying out different things.
Presence is awesome. I would go with Ramble On as the single best Led Zeppelin song of all time.
I can't debate. If we're going singles, that's a great choice. Off of the Zeppelin 2 album, I'm probably bringing on home.
Oh, yeah. Going to California doesn't suck either.
Welcome to our music podcast, Michael Regan. So let's just get everybody to know who you are if they don't know already. You are currently, and have been for a very long time, a coach, not just within the mortgage space or just within the mortgage space?
That's a fair question. Most of my clients are probably in mortgage lending, but I work with folks in real estate and other related verticals. And over the last 11 years, I've worked with folks that you would probably classify as entrepreneurs. They're in other small businesses that may or may not be related to real estate. But I typically stay with entrepreneurial people, where the bulk of the clients at Building Champions today are probably more in corporate environments. And given that that's not where I came from, I'm not as drawn to coach those folks. I totally understand and respect why we work in those spaces. But yeah, most of the folks I tend to work with tend to be in mortgage lending or real estate.
Nice. And you're with Building Champions, one of our favorite companies in the world. It's fun getting coaches on here because we get to get two sides of it, right? We get the Michael Regan, the human, who deals with things like everybody else does. And then Michael Regan, the coach, who can tell us some of the things based on your wisdom of what you've seen over the years of coaching people through tough times, of getting them through. I mean, you've been with people through very difficult times. And so we won't get personal stories of people. We want to get that perspective from you. So first of all, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast. We've known each other for a little bit. My favorite Michael Regan story is playing pickleball in your backyard until your wife came out and said, "Are they ever going to leave?" The answer was no. We probably would have never left. But yeah,
I think her concern was less about you leaving and more about, will our neighbors at midnight start
Call the
saying,
cops.
that is annoying, stop.
That's true.
Yeah,
That's
she was just trying to be thoughtful in the neighbors.
Yeah. And that's in Scottsdale, but you live both places, or you did live both places. Talk about a little bit about your kind of moves back and forth, because I've always been curious about that.
Yeah, well, thank you for disclosing that on the podcast, where the IRS now has some recorded proof of my dual residency.
For 181 days a year, I stay.
You aren't far off from the truth. So we do make Scottsdale, Arizona our primary residence, and then we live in Lake Oswego, Oregon during the summer and fall because they're glorious times to be in the
Hard to
Pacific
beat.
Northwest.
Yeah. There's a comedian I heard say he lives in LA, and he said, people say, what about the seasons? And he goes, that's why I live in a place that skips the sucky ones. So good call, moving just based on where the best weather is at any given time.
Lord willing, that's how we're doing it right now. And we look at this every year. I mean, part of the review of our life plan, my wife and I, who've been married for 32 years, and we very much explore it with an open hand. If we can, afford to keep doing this, logistically it makes sense to keep doing this, it's a blessing to be in two places, and it allows us to develop two communities of friends. And that's a really interesting part of it as well, as you've got these relationships that we've had back to the 80s when we started at Arizona State that have carried through in that community. And then, I joined Building Champions full-time in 2013, but started working with the company back in 2006. And so we built a lot of relationships here in the Northwest through that. And it feels great to have both. I really would look forward to being in both places at different times of the year because of the people that are there.
You classify them as the tan community and the not very tan community? Is that how you?
There is a little bit of some vitamin D shortage going on when I come up here.
Deficiency.
But that gives me an opportunity, back to Ken's comment, to invite my friends, hey, come down to the desert, just get a shot of vitamin D. And oh, by the way, the pickleball court just got resurfaced. So let's go.
Nice. So going.
And additional lighting, as I understand.
You got to be able to see the ball.
There you go.
We are getting a little
Talk
older.
about that 2006. That goes back into your mortgage experience, right? That give us a little backstory on your connection with the crazy world of home financing.
Yeah, well, without a doubt, it is part of my story. And during that season, most of my team experience looked a lot like what we see today, except in 2006, not a lot of people were working within a team environment. We had decided maybe in 2004 to start exploring the idea of diversifying our skills down to really narrow, unique abilities, and then hiring other people in their unique abilities to create a better delivery system for both our clients and our partners. And we really didn't have a roadmap to follow. In fact, if I'm being honest, our roadmap was probably more in the real estate industry. Guys like Gary Keller had already accomplished that within a different execution, and we tried to borrow from that as much as we could. We didn't have things like transaction coordinators, we had loan coordinators, but we managed to cobble together something that looked like a team. And by 2006, we were fully optimized, running on all cylinders, working in North Scottsdale with a mix of borrowers that many of which didn't need loans. They used them strategically as part of their overall real estate plan. And we all know what happened in 2007. I went from not knowing what an FHA loan was in 2006 to my team having to close about 100 of them just to keep the lights on in 2008 and 2009. So it was an interesting time to go through that shift, no question about it.
When did you get into the industry?
So rewind that tape back to 2002. I was running a small manufacturing business in Tempe, which is a whole another season of my life that I loved as well, but it wasn't in real estate or mortgage lending at all. And I happened to own some rental real estate in which I wanted to go through some refinancing. Those of you in the business back in 2002, that was also a decent season to evaluate that.
Indeed.
The loan originator that I was working with was also a friend. And as I would bring him back then your paper files with tax returns, bank statements, he finally looked at me like something was wrong and said, I'm sorry, what kind of business do you run again? And when I told him it was an acoustical panel manufacturer, primarily in the cinema industry, he looked even more perplexed. He said, the only person that's ever brought me documentation like this is my CPA. So explain to me again what this business is, because you really are tight on your paperwork. And that caused me to be curious. Well, tell me what that means. I'm just bringing you what I think is normal. Well, come to find out, I'm a bit of a nerd at heart. I started running Quicken back in 1992 on a, DOS execute, before we even had Windows, or maybe it was 3.1, but it was old. And I really was diligent about budgeting and managing personal finance at home. And the light bulb went on for this loan originator. And he said, you could probably help out a lot of my clients because you're not what they typically hear from. You're not a financial advisor who's trying to get them to invest money. You're not a CPA who's trying to process their tax returns. You're just a guy who runs a business and really understands how to manage personal finance. So that started some conversations around the idea of, well, tell me then what you do. And as we learned a little more about each other's business, the big conclusion I drew from that was, I'm helping people hear a soundtrack in a movie at a more interesting level. This guy has access to helping people at a very personal level, securing the financing they need to get the home that they want. He's actually making a difference in their real life. I've made their night out sound a little better. I didn't feel very purposeful in that moment. And so I began to flip the script and said, if you really think I could help people, could I help you? And could I help you elevate your business model? Because I'm not that interested in knocking on real estate agent doors. I'd be more interested in helping the actual consumers develop a plan toward a financial freedom point. And the two of us cobbled that for, a few months. And at some point he said, let's do it. And I'm going to make you a partner from day one. So with literally no previous experience as a lender, He said, I'm just going to trust that you're going to figure that part out because you figured all this other stuff out running your business and running your own personal finance. I'll trust that you'll figure out how to originate loans. And January 1st of 2003, away we went. And that's how I got in.
Wow.
What I love about that story is it's mission driven from the get-go.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that there was anything negative about building acoustic panels for the motion picture or for the theater business, but you resonated so clearly with something that was significant and that it contributed to other people and their success, their financial success, their ability to manage their lives more effectively and build personal wealth through real estate, ideally, at least in the best expression of it. That probably translates pretty directly into what drew you from mortgage into coaching, another intentional, purpose-driven.
That's a good observation, because I think what I learned early on as a lender was, okay, I've got to think this through. I'm technically helping people secure more debt in order to get them toward a place where they don't need debt anymore. I better come up with a system. I better be able to take my practical knowledge that I've experienced and systematize it in some way, shape, or form to be able to deliver that with integrity. Otherwise, I'm just, I've got a different hook, and that's not what I wanted. I did not want a different hook. I truly believed that we could change people's trajectory in life if we could get them to think about debt differently rather than a necessary evil to buy this home. It could be used in a way that allowed them to build wealth and to pay off debts and to ultimately not need a mortgage at all. So I developed a system. I mean, I remember sitting with my friend 𝗪𝗏𝗶𝗹𝗶, a friend of both of ours, and we would take our Building Champions journals that we had as clients of the company back then, and we'd sketch out all these crazy ideas. And I remember seeing his early sketches of Win by Noon, and he remembers seeing my early sketches of the Freedom Point mortgage plan. And over time, I developed a strategy that I began to deliver to those clients during our consultation. So part of our initial process was getting me engaged in a very early conversation during the application process to introduce the basic 101 topics of mortgage planning. And the whole goal was to create two areas of trust. One with the customer, that they're approaching this loan differently than anybody I've talked to at the bank or at a brokerage or a private mortgage company. But I also wanted to build trust within the referral community, whether that was going to be a real estate agent, a financial advisor, or anyone else in that network. I wanted them to know that even if that client didn't choose to execute on the financing with my team, they were going to get an experience sitting down with me that they would take with them. And that was my goal. So I started sketching these things out on a whiteboard while we were talking. And I don't know, 6, 7, maybe 8 times out of 10, someone would say at the end of the appointment, could I take a picture of that? Because you're the first person who ever gave me a financial plan that made sense to me, because I wasn't selling them anything. There was nothing about the financial plan that was based on a product I could even offer them. The plan was how to securitize this mortgage for a strategy to ultimately not need it anymore 10, 15, 20 years down the road. And I articulated it in a way that a business owner would do it rather than a CFP. I didn't speak in language they didn't understand. I said simple things like we maybe later on the radio heard Dave Ramsey saying. I just didn't totally align with his ideology. There were some things he felt very rigid about that I felt more flexible with, because I felt that most of the people I worked with benefited from, he would say things like, I don't really believe in borrowing money, or you really need to bring 20% down. And my answer was, okay, that's a place to start the conversation, but let's don't be so rigid with people. It makes them feel like you're arrogant and you know everything and they know nothing.
And if they're incapable of doing that, then they're without options.
Yeah, I wanted to learn more about them so that we could build trust, because ultimately I wanted them to take this plan, execute on it, and then come back to me to tell me the progress they're making. And now I'll tie it back to your question in case we rambled away from it. That's when I first realized I think I love coaching. I had just found a unique avenue in which to introduce coaching as a mortgage lender. And at some point, I needed more help with the system than I could create on my own. My little sketches on the whiteboard were, kind of nice 8th grade level explanations, but I didn't feel that I had a bigger picture. And when I started working with Building Champions as a client, I realized, okay, some of the framework available to me now in a life plan translates beautifully to some of the things I want to communicate with that client. And I think once I experienced the benefit of that myself, it was very easy for me to feel convicted to share that with others. Till one day my team had to tell me, you love coaching way more than you love putting a 1003 in the system. And I really couldn't deny that fact. So at some point, you just have to realize when a man goes out to chase 2 rabbits, he catches neither. So pick your lane. Are you here to originate loans, or are you here to help coach people toward bigger lives? And that's perhaps where the fork in the road came.
I've got a direction I want to go in now.
Go.
Because you pick something. I picked some things up from what you were saying, in that we are very similar in we want to change lives. Like you went in as a loan officer, not so that you can go make money, not so you can go do, like, it was sounds like your biggest reason was I can affect people's lives in a way that they're not currently being affected. Your coaching career has been affecting lives, changing lives, making people better from the day they met you till the day, you're not in conversation with them anymore. Like, you want them to be different. You want them to be better. One thing that I struggle with in that quest is taking it on myself when they didn't get better. How have you dealt with that in coaching? Because I'm sure not everybody has the same, wow experience. My life has changed and I'll never go back. We've all done loans where you get their credit fixed, then they're like back to their old habits, right? How do you not take that personally?
It's a really great observation that you're making, because I think emotionally, if we care enough on the front end, it's logical to think, well, then we're going to care on the other end of the spectrum. And so I think some of this is a fundamental coaching practice of beginning with the end in mind, so that you establish some of those boundaries at the beginning. So whether that's in a client relationship looking at a long-term financial plan, or whether that's today for me in a coaching plan, I'm really orienting toward their story and their vision. It's not about me. I'm a guide, and my only job in the journey is to keep pointing them in the direction they told me they want to go. I can't emotionally attach myself to participate in that story in terms of the execution of it, or the risk, as you just suggested, is now I'm feeling the pain. I've already got that challenge with my kids. I'm invested in their story, and when they deviate from it, you can't help but have your heartstrings pulled. So with clients, I had to establish that boundary up front, which was, let's get really clear on who you are, really who you are, not who you think you are. Let's get honest about who you are, good, bad, ugly. Let's get honest about what you really want, and let's strip away all of the veneer that says this is what I should want, or this is what people have told me matters. Let's really get clear on what you want, and then let's dig into the purpose behind that. Why are we going to go down this road? If I can get clear on those 3 things, even without walking them through a formal exercise called a personal vision, they are beginning to craft their personal vision. Because once I know who they are, what they want, and why they want it, I can start asking really great questions about where that will go. Once we've drafted that, I attempt to then establish at the beginning of this journey what my role is going to be. And I think that's the way I'm able to protect myself. Because if I don't, they might think that I'm, putting on the backpack because I'm literally walking this journey with them. And the truth is, I can't want their life outcomes more than they do. So I have to be clear about that up front. My job is to be in your corner. It's very much like a boxing trainer who's in the corner. I'm in your corner. I can't step into that ring with you. All I can do is prepare you for the type of opponent you're going to face and the skills that you have in order to defeat that opponent. If I do my job of preparing for you for that, I'm in your corner, and I'm always in your corner, even if we're not in that active coaching relationship. I'm once we sign up, unless one of us dies, I'm always in your corner.
Well, that's that powerful distinction between what a coach really is versus what a teacher is or a counselor is. There's a really specific designation for what coaching really means. And I think you just beautifully articulated that.
Yeah, I'm glad you say that, Kirk, because I think you and I've talked about that before, and that's a Um, that's a difficult thing to explain to people, at least in the industry that we currently practice in, because a lot of people use the term coach as a descriptor for what they really do, which is they train people on a system that they've created, which means as the coach, they're creating the agenda. It means they're creating the content. They may even create the timetables, like this is what we're going to do this week or this month. Nothing wrong with those things. But if we really look at them under the purest intention of what the description of a coach would be, it's the exact opposite. It's not about the coach's agenda or even the coach's skill set. It's about their ability to help unpack the agenda from the person who is on that journey and to help them develop the skill set they will need for that journey. And that is different. And
Totally.
and the fact that people call themselves coaches, I don't get too persnickety about it, because I get it. I guess you can call yourself whatever you'd like. But at the end of the day, the brand of coaching that I'm going to execute under is going to always be about the other person. It's not about me. And I'll fight for that. Occasionally they'll ask me, stop asking me questions. Just tell me what to do.
Uh-huh.
And I'm empathetic enough to dig into that. And there are times where I have to acknowledge, okay, we're taking off the coach hat. I'm your advisor now, or I am your trainer in this unique situation. But again, that's the same thing as I suggested about starting the journey with boundaries. Let's reframe the rules of engagement for this portion of the conversation, because right now I'm not coaching you, I'm directing you. And as long as we're clear on that, then we can come back to where we need to be in our coaching relationship. Occasionally you meet someone who says, oh, now I really get it. I really don't want to coach. I really do just want someone to tell me what to do. And then I have to make a hard decision about whether or not I can really help them in the trainer role or whether I'm best directing them toward an expert who can help them.
And it
Have
goes,
you ended engagements because of that?
Oh, sure, but not in a not in a cold break kind of way,
Yeah.
more in like a breakthrough. Like, I think as the coach who has walked with you to this point in helping you figure out what you really want, I've realized who you want it from needs to be this other person. That I don't know, maybe I have an abundant mindset with that, but I feel like that's what I should be doing. I should always be helping them connect with who they need to know to accomplish what they want. Because again, we start from the beginning. It wasn't my agenda, it was theirs. So as long as I don't, reverse the intention of our relationship, I can do that with integrity and celebrate them. And guess what happens? Occasionally, not always, but occasionally clients come back to you a year or two down the road having received exactly what they were looking for and realizing, I now want new things. And I remember you're the one who can help me figure out how to get those things. So we come right back into a natural coaching relationship because they've now got a new vision. The vision for most of us tends to be the long-term draw, but the mission changes over the years. And some people don't get that. They get confused on what those words mean. And I understand that if you're not living in that world every day, they sound like interchangeable parts. But I remind them the vision is made up of several things. It's made up of your personal convictions that you bring to the table. It's made up of your personal mission and purpose. It's made up of a future that you see that's better than where you are now. And it's made up of a lot of bets you're willing to place to cross that chasm from where we are today to where we're trying to get. All of that, including some really big goals. That's vision. But the mission is, what am I going to do specifically in this moment to accomplish a very measurable outcome that's in alignment with that vision? So I often remind people that it's okay to accomplish a goal, and the mission was accomplished, and now we set new goals and therefore a new mission. And so it's fun when they come back because I get to discover, okay, we've got a whole new palette of colors to work with. Let's paint something new.
and you stay true to your mission, which is begin with the end in mind for your own self and your own business as a coach, and ideally, to the degree you can, to impart that to your coaching clients. That it was one of the coolest phrases I retain from my early exposure to building champions. This idea that our doing comes from our being, and we really mess up life badly when we get that reversed. When we start to define who we are by what we do, or by the successes we've achieved. But are being an extension of who we are, life planning as a precursor to any sort of business vision or business planning or priority management. That's the magic. And it's that intentionality that you approached your own life with that allowed you to create a coaching model that encouraged intentionality on the part of the people you coach with. And then if they do say, no, I want to coach, or I want a trainer or a teacher, and then they end up coming back, it's because they were able to reconnect with that intention of what they really want out of their own experience.
I'll give you an analogy for that most people can recognize. Because again, part of my job as a coach is to break things down to a level in which a junior high student could understand it, because that's where we get broad application. So when people ask me, well, then why are we starting with a life plan? I came to you as a business coach. Why are we doing that first? I can take that conversation in a lot of directions. One of the things I'll explain to them is, imagine you're planning a vacation and you've planned some version of a time off and a time away that's going to require you to get on a plane and go somewhere. Wouldn't it be really important to you on this vacation to know some basic things like, where is this flight scheduled to land? Like, what's the destination that we're actually going to land at? What's the weather like? What do I need to pack? How long would I be gone on this trip? I mean, is it a travel bag? Am I putting some luggage in? How about the pilot? Would it not be important to you to know that he didn't or she didn't just jump into the seat that day and start flying? They might have prepared a flight plan. They might have done a really great system check on the airplane. This is our life. Our life is like being midair. And a lot of times there are a lot of valuable people on our plane, people we love and care about, family members, friends, coworkers. We have a responsibility as leaders to make sure we've done the diligence. We've prepared for that trip. We have an itinerary for this plan. We've done the pre-flight checklist. We have logged a flight plan with the FAA. They know where we are in the air for safety reasons. These are things that we all would agree with when we're traveling. And so I bring it back to their role as a leader, specifically again in our industry, and remind them it's no different with you as a leader. We can't ask people to board your plane and just trust that you'll figure it out once we're midair. That's a terrible strategy. So let's take the time to develop the framework. Maybe that framework will change as we take a few flights together and we realize, oh, okay, I thought I wanted to go here. I think I would rather go there. Great. Let's read. That's where the mission might change a little along the way. But I'd rather work with something that was defined up front so that we have some very basic coaching fundamentals. I have a good sense of, what am I holding you accountable to? Is it the things that I put on you, or the things you stated to me that I now get to be your reminder? I get to help you stay focused when maybe real life starts to happen. We all get some version of distracted. So I want to make sure that I'm thoughtful enough to have a tool that takes them back to their words and their commitments. Otherwise, coaching can get a little bit misaligned, and I see that from time to time when a coach starts shoulding all over their clients. Sorry, I didn't just cuss on your podcast. They tell them you should do this and you shouldn't do that. They probably mean well, but what truly happens is they've now changed the dynamic of that relationship. And all of a sudden that client starts to feel like, oh, I get it. You're my dad, or you're my big brother. You're my boss. You're trying to put authority over me that I didn't ask for. As a coach, it's my job to establish that authority authentically, which is getting them to invite me into that accountability relationship. And that means we've got to get all that down on paper first, because I can't plug into your head and know what's going on. I need you to extract it. And then guess what happens? Once it's on paper, so often we find out, now we should be asking much better questions, because we see what really matters to you, or where your fears really lie, or where your opportunities exist, or where the dangers exist. All those things are possible when you download that story from me. So I always want to start with that.
If you are watching this podcast and you're in the mortgage industry and you haven't checked out the Knowledge Coop, you definitely need to dive into the Knowledge Coop. In there, you will find content and community that will help you grow as an individual by learning everything there is to know about the mortgage industry. If you think you know everything, just dive in and take some classes, because there's always something more you can learn. To be successful in this business, you've got to continually learn. In addition, if you're a company and you want to teach your people in your own environment, we've got that in the Knowledge Coop Enterprise Services. So reach out to us, check out knowledgecoop.com. Definitely join Coop Plus. Let's get back to the podcast.
So beginning with the end in mind is a recipe for creating a successful, mission-driven plan for your life, right? And that's powerful and beautiful, and it works until it doesn't, right? When what I mean by that is life will throw a curveball that doesn't fit within the plan that you created or I created for my life. I would love to hear you talk about how that curveball, how you integrate that curveball into how you coach your clients when they face that unforeseen circumstance that takes this path that they're moving towards, and it completely deviates it, at least for a time necessarily, or by some consequence, or in your own life, how this well-laid, you're a very well-planned person. There have to be those moments in your life where life just said, we're doing something different. Coaching through that, either for your own self or through your clients. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I'll step back and reference, as I did, budgeting. Budgeting is a lot like what you just described. Budgeting is simply just telling your money where to go. I mean, it's not really more complicated than that. But real life tends to throw a monkey wrench into that budget. And so we have to live our life with some understanding that very rarely, I mean, just like a flight, we use that analogy, we find out, even that flight plan, if we leave Portland International today and we decide to fly east, pick your airport, by the time we land in New York, we will have been on track about 1% to 2% of the flight. The rest of the flight is flight adjustments to the atmosphere around us. The budget is like that too. Hey, here's our perfect plan, honey. We're going to earn this, we're going to spend that, and we're going to save this, and we're going to give here. Any questions? None, until the very first paycheck hits and commissions weren't what you thought they would be, or the very first bill hits and, I didn't know we had that charge on top of that fee.
Or all 5 cars need tires at the same time. That literally happened to us. All 5 cars needed tires. That's 3 kids and us. That's not, we just have 1 apiece, but yeah.
Sounded like you had a whole fleet there for a moment.
I guess it's different. Yeah.
You're right, Ken. And I think that's an example of what you're describing when I then have someone work through a life plan. It's the same moment of, hope and dream and wait, real life just happened. What do you mean I'm dealing with an event that maybe I didn't even choose? An event that I have to decide how to handle, even though I didn't ask for it. I think what we have to back up and look at in that is, what was the purpose of this plan in the first place? Was it to draft some idealistic version that could never be faced in reality? Or was it like a compass that allows us to reorient toward true north when we get thrown off our course? And if I treat it like a compass, or maybe in modern language, like a GPS, we all plug an address in. I came up to Vancouver today from Lake Oswego, and as I plug in the address, of course, it gives me 2, maybe 3 options. Here's the fast route, here's the short route, and here's the scenic route. And who doesn't want to take the scenic route through Portland? It's an option that I just
Is there one?
Could barely resist. So you look at these 3 options, but you choose one, and then you start driving. Well, your GPS didn't account for the guy that broke down on the road that day, or it didn't account for the street sweeper's out, we're going to divert traffic.
The shootings. You mentioned Portland.
Okay, well, thank you for being a little more honest about that. And at some point, you take an alternate route. Does your GPS dysfunction, or does it recalculate? It reminds you, I see what you did. Here's how to get back on track to where you were trying to go. That's how I'm going to introduce a budget. That's how I'm going to introduce a life plan. It's a tool that helps us reorient when real life happens, because real life is always going to throw off a perfect plan. That's not even a if, it's a when. And usually the win is 2 or 3 minutes after you said, this is it. And my hope with most people is that they can attach some trust in that statement early on in our process, that we're not designing your perfect life. We are designing a tool that will reorient you when your real life happens, and it'll keep you on course.
I love the navigation illustration, because navigation prior to GPS was about finding a fixed point and using that as your reference. And the life plan, or beginning with the end in mind, is about deciding what your fixed point is And then as you go through life and you have some heartache or heartbreak, or you have some diagnosis, or you have something that completely kicks you in the teeth, if you are willing, you can remind yourself that I've got that fixed point and I'm going to find my way back to that. I love the navigation illustration.
That's interesting because I remember I had done my life plan with Building Champions. I was a master's coach, and then 2020 hit, and I threw everything out the window. And so in crisis times, I think that's what you're kind of getting at. I remember in my crisis, it was, and I was being coached at the time by Bill. But I remember the last thing I was thinking about is my life plan. Like I was in such chaos, anxiety was high, depression was real, and for me, it was gathering with our group at Building Champions. It was gathering with friends, and even though it was online at the time, it was. I remember going to Bend and meeting up with some guys to golf. It was super illegal that we were doing it, but we did it safely. But we were golfing, and I was just like, I needed this so badly. I need that connection, but I wasn't. How do you get people to remember their life plan during that time instead of being that crisis mode kicks you into such a tunnel vision of everything sucks, everything sucks, everything sucks. I don't remember everything ever being good. Like for me, it was really tough, and that reaction's so foreign for me because I live a pretty easy life usually.
You're asking a question that I think I'll tie back to your comment about getting kicked in the teeth. So, the Mike Tyson quote is always, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. I kind of like kicked in the teeth. I think
It was a Walt Disney quote.
I'll make that my, oh, darn it. I was hoping I could own that. Ken, I think, how do I help people through that? I think the truth is you have to, as a coach, you have to start with a really clear look in the mirror. I walk on feet of clay. My life isn't perfect. Just because some, friend of mine who was a loan originator complimented my bookkeeping didn't mean I was an amazing human being. It just meant I was a nerd with this area of my life, and I can help people with that. I have other areas in my life that other people have to help me with. And I think as a coach, the first thing I've got to do when I look in the mirror every morning is realize I get a choice. I will either choose the attitude that I'm helping these people because I've achieved and accomplished and I can show them the way. I use a fake voice on purpose because I would never think that, would never say that.
I was picturing you with a pipe and an ascot.
Yeah, totally. By a fireplace.
Yeah, I thank you for saying ascot. I think I choose the opposite, which is have enough humility today to see people for who they really are, to hear what they're going through with genuine empathy, if at all possible, and then remind yourself that we are at a dark place on the journey because they just got kicked in the teeth, and not to contribute to their pain by jumping back into rescue mode. That's not the time in which someone's prepared to handle that. In fact, usually when I've experienced people in highly anxious situations, they're flailing, their amygdala's hijacked. They are not thinking rationally. And so piling, well, your life plan said this, when this happens, do that.
You just need to.
Yeah. We're back to shooting all over
on
them.
Yeah.
In that moment, I need to remind them that I'm here for you and that I love you and that I care about you. And maybe sometimes I don't even say those words. I live them. I just do what I have to do. I drop everything to be there for them. There'll be a time where we can pull out the compass or the GPS. And you're right. GPS is an interesting technology. It's really looking at an axis and a radius, that address. It's looking on a satellite view of an axis and a radius. It's picking that destination somewhere on the Earth, and it's creating a map. There'll be a time where I might say, "Ooh, Ken, before you throw that out the window, just don't look at it right now. You and I just spend some time together. Let's come back to that. Maybe you already threw it out the window. Hey, that's okay. I saved a copy for you. I'm going to be able to help you when the time is right." Or maybe we even take the route of, you know what? Sometimes in life, erase the slate is the right answer. Maybe that was an old story for a different season in your life. And maybe we just need to acknowledge that it's okay to start fresh because all of that emotion and experience comes with you. But let's start with a fresh sheet of paper and let's draw a new plan for a new story. All of those are options. not trying to turn this into a sample of what I do, but that's the way I'm going to approach it. I'm not going to belittle the person like, well, hey, dumbass, that was your compass you just threw out the window. I'm also not going to act like, well, okay, call me back when you get through all of that, because I'm
We'll
here
get you
for the
back on
I'm
plan.
here for the positive side of your life. Yeah, that real coaching happens when they get punched in the face. That's when the coach shows up.
And it's funny, as a friend and an observer of your life, I know that that time was dark, but I also know that there's some core principles to your life that you stayed true to, and your family and your spouse, and even the wisdom to say, I need to go play golf with some friends. That's staying true to your life plan. People matter to me. Community matters to me. And it's in those little bitty things you did when you were utterly dark and despair that kept you moving towards, at least in general, this idea of what I want my life to be. Your business didn't fail. It suffered. It struggled. Things happened, but you kept moving towards, this is who I am. This is what I want to be. And sometimes that's all you can do, is just take that next step.
Yeah, it's so funny as you talking. I was getting emotional. You probably caught that because you're very perceptive. But just thinking back to how Bill did it, I didn't even catch it when he was doing it, but he did exactly what you just said, where it wasn't fix Ken time. It was just be here for Ken time. It's when he introduced me to the concept of ER, where he's like, hey, I've got an ER line too. Like, you call me if you need emergency coaching. Because with a coach, you're always like, I don't want to call him. Like, I don't have my time till 2 p.m. on Wednesday. I don't really pay him for more than 2 p.m. on Wednesday. And so I always wanted to respect that and not reach out and ask for anything more, because there's a payment relationship, right? I'm paying him for this service, and I don't want to abuse that relationship. And so he saw that I wasn't calling him, and he's like, dude, that happened Tuesday. I have a phone, right? Like, pick up the freaking phone and call me if this happens. And so he was just there, and just knowing he was there, I didn't need to go into, well, in 3 years, I'm going to have this. And here's the story. I wake up in 5 years and I go out to my front porch and I grab the paper. Like, this isn't time for that. This is time for getting me. I wake up tomorrow and I go outside and I take a walk. And so that's the beauty of this coaching, which is so funny because this morning, literally, I open up Facebook this morning. There's a new coach, which there are a billion new coaches, right? If you can't do loans right now, you can totally coach. I shouldn't have said that. That's so mean, but
Was
I'm
it
going to say it out
was
loud.
that the inside voice that just slipped out?
And it's okay, because we all know that there's truth in that, right? There are coaches that are amazing, and there are coaches that get in because they're like, I don't know what else to do, but let me just try this out. But I saw a coach, and the Facebook post it was a sponsored ad, 5 to 10 more loans. If you could do 5 to 10 more loans a month, what would that do to your life? Now come join my coaching program. Let's get you to that. And I thought, it's I had this massive thought immediately that was like, what if I don't want 5 to 10 more loans a month? What if it's not about that? What if it's about a bunch of other things that I care about in life? And what if doing like 4 more loans in my life is that actually would be great, because then that would give me the time to live the life that I want to live. But the concept I see constantly on Facebook is 5 to 10 more loans. You and I just heard it at a conference. Just read
Follow
this
these
thing
five
and you're going to have
steps.
12 more deals every single month. You want to make $250,000? I just did that for you. And it's like, what you're saying right now is so opposite of current coaching culture that I'm seeing out there, and so refreshing.
Well, I promise what I'm telling you is just naturally who I've been. Folks that have been walking with me for the last 30 years as a professional will tell you that I'm often a bit of a contrarian to the typical ideology, and I don't do that to get a rise out of people. I do it because my thinking is there's got to be somebody else out there like me that thinks this is all a joke. I don't want to be a mortgage industry celebrity. I got introduced to somebody at the conference we attended in Las Vegas, and the reaction from this person was, "Oh my gosh, you're Michael Regan. I've heard that you exist, but I didn't know if you were a real person." And at first I thought this was just sarcasm. And he's like, "No, like, I'm serious. I've heard all about you. You're just not out
On
self-promoting yourself
Insta,
on the circuit."
yeah.
And I will admit at that moment, I felt like mission accomplished, because I want, and my clients hopefully would agree with this, is I want them to know that just how you felt with Bill, you felt heard and known and cared for in a genuine way, not billed. I'm not your accountant. We don't start I'm not your attorney. I'm not even your therapist. I'm not billing you for that time. Do you know what those 2 coaching calls a month are? They're anchor points to make sure that we have an orientation toward, here's what you said you would be working on. Let's make sure we have a checkpoint already baked into our schedule to check on that. Great, checkpoint is there. Now real life happens in between those calls. I, Perhaps I'm a terrible manager of my time for this reason. Here's a guy who teaches time blocking. I make myself available outside of those coaching calls for every one of my clients because I know that's when real life is happening. And guess what? They never abuse it. We never spend more time talking than they need for that moment. And sometimes they're 5 or 10 minute conversations. If I can be available and help them in that moment and demonstrate the actual care I have for what we said we're doing, mission accomplished. So I don't need to be highly visible. I don't need to be highly unavailable outside of my billing hours. I need the opposite of both of those. So you saying that actually validates exactly what I want. Because I guess go back in the story, I started as a client of Building Champions, and I got to experience what it felt like to see some of that line being drawn, and I made decisions along the way. If that's ever me, I'm going to do it differently. I'm going to be abundant. I'm going to give away as much as I can, trusting that that will demonstrate the truth of my intention. And then there'll be a time where it's appropriate to be paid. That happens. I'm not, not a not-for-profit organization. And I want Building Champions to benefit because they provide me a platform to do all of this. But I never want my client to think, I can't call him. My call's not scheduled till 2 weeks. I would do the same thing Bill did. If I found out someone sat on very difficult information to wait for our call, I would ask them, why did we draft that life plan in the first place? What was the point of that exercise if I wasn't available to you in a time when you needed me? Were you just filling in the blanks to check a box and say, exercise complete? We got to live that thing. I'm trying to live mine. I'm walking with you. You call me.
And you're honoring the uniqueness of each individual. Like I can definitely feel that as you talk. It's like it's about that person. Like each person has their own journey. You're a part of that journey for as long as they allow you into their world. And you have to honor that and not one size fits all everybody and be like, well, this is the big chart I've got. Just fill this chart out. We're going to be good. Because for some people, it's just for everybody. I mean, we're all so unique.
That's really interesting, Ken, because I don't think about this because, again, I don't script. Here's my script for today, a blank sheet of paper. I don't script my initial interview calls. So if a client is referred to me and we're going to talk about coaching, one of the things we do when we set this up is I explain to them how we're going to work through some of these tools. And I remind them, don't mistake these as my system. These are simply tools to help me uncover your story. Because as soon as I can do that, those tools have accomplished their mission in that moment. Now, thankfully, they pay dividends. We're going to be able to access them again for new things we're learning and new things we're doing. But that is not my script. And that's what makes Building Champions a little bit different than other coaching companies is we tend to draw and attract, I suppose, more entrepreneurial people who don't want to be systematized. They want just enough structure to know that you're not freewheeling it here, but enough freedom within that to say, look, I don't want to design the same tools and system that everybody else is using. I actually have a different vision. I want to craft something different. That's why I love coaching with Building Champions is that's the way we approach it. This will simply be a framework to help us get your story out on paper. And the minute it's out there, your plan from that moment forward, your priority management time block, your simple focus plan will never look like someone else's because I'm not going to say, oh, here's the Michael Regan system. Do these 5 things in the morning. These are the things you do in your break time. These are the things you finish your day with. And here's how to sleep at night. When I hear coaches do that, I think just call it what it is. You're a guru who wants to train people on your system. If someone wants that and that makes their life better, wonderful. It's a big old world. That's not who I am. I'm not going to coach people toward a system. If they would like to know a little bit about my personal life, I'm always an open book. If they want to, I've had clients tell, okay, you talk about budgeting. Like, what would that look like? Would you like to see my Quicken file? I'll send it over. Take a look. Let's talk about it. Yeah. Here, how does this work? You're managing all this real estate. You're managing investments. How do you do it? Would you like to see my balance sheet? Let's work through that. I'm not afraid to do that because I don't want them to think I'm just talking a good game. I want them to see I'm just like you. We're two blind mice trying to find the cheese. I'm willing to be honest about it and say, I think I found some cheese. Let's go on this journey together.
Mm-hmm. It's so funny. So Mindy's a therapist, you know that, and people will always ask her, so do you do therapy on Ken? Because she specializes in ADHD and marriage, and the answer, both of us will say, absolutely not. Like she has such a good line where I know she's tempted, but she'll oftentimes just refer me back to my therapist and be like, you should talk to your therapist about that. That sounds awesome. Are you a coach at home? You remember Little
Mm,
Miss Sunshine?
Oh yeah.
He was like
Oh
a
yeah.
keynote speaker or something, and always like, like, try to be him. What's home like for you?
that's a really interesting perspective. So most of us, let me set it up really quickly. Building Champions offers in 2019 two options for its coaches, going back to 2019. Some of the coaches based in Lake Oswego work in an office environment. It looks very much like a lending office. There's a bullpen in the middle and offices around the perimeter, and the coaches shut their door and they occasionally come out to go to the bathroom and get a drink of water. And that's what it looks like. Another group of coaches, Bill would have been one of these, work remotely. They work from home. They set up a personal space for their coaching calls. 2020 comes around. Suddenly, no one's working in the office. Well, we had a little bit of a head start on the idea that we know how to coach remotely because half of our coaches were already doing it. So we have the tools set up. We basically have the playbook. We know how to set it up. Well, I got a little jump start on COVID. So in 2019, I'm living in Lake Oswego. My son is a junior in high school. We have an exchange student from Lyon, France, living in our home. My daughter Sydney is off in San Francisco finishing her architectural degree at Academy of Art University. And my daughter Maddie has taken a break from George Fox University to go move back to Arizona simply to get a reset. She just feels like I need to go back to where we were from to get a hard reset on life. I go to visit her I promise we're going to get to this
You're
answer.
good. You're good.
I go in 2019 on her birthday, February, about this time of year, to go visit Maddie for her 21st birthday. And I had written out this beautiful journal of thoughts I had from a dad to an emerging
Wow.
21-year-old. Was so excited to spend this time with her. I was going to go down for a few days and then come back up. Life was going to go on. And I got to Arizona and got to my daughter's studio apartment, and I found a broken person, and broken in a very difficult way for a dad to experience. She had hidden from us the fact that some of what she had been dealing with medically from some very real surgical procedures had involved some painkiller medication that she had not been able to stop taking. And in fact, the only solution to deal with the difficulty she was going through was to take a little more of it. And once that spin cycle starts, there's a flywheel, it starts to take over, and a person's brain chemistry changes and they become addicted to something that they didn't intend to become addicted to. They were literally just trying to ease the pain. And this is the story of many of our friends who find alcohol or drugs or other resources for that pain. And I remember calling my wife and saying, I'm going to cancel my flight. I'm not coming back to Portland. I'm going to need to spend some time with Maddie because we're in a tough spot, and I'm going to need to reroute my calls and coach remotely, and real life's going to happen differently than I'd planned. Kind of like your earlier, this was my getting kicked in the teeth. This wasn't part of my plan. And Maddie and I went on this journey together in which we ultimately were successful in eradicating these pain medications, but it took about a year and a half to get there. And in that year and a half, my wife and my son had to relocate back to Scottsdale with me because it wasn't a good formula for our family dynamic for me to be living in an apartment in Arizona with my wife and son, an exchange student in Oregon. So we got Raphael through the season in which he graduated as an exchange student and sold a home here in Lake Oswego that we loved and relocated back to a place in Arizona simply so we could be there for Maddie. So what does it look like to be a coach who's then at home doing all that? That season of my life is when I realized that I'm going to have to I'm going to have to practice everything I've ever preached, which means I'm going to have to recognize that working remotely might not have been what I wanted to do in that moment, but I didn't know a little event was going to happen a year later called COVID when we were all going to have to do that. I was a good year ahead of everybody because I embraced the fact that things were going to be a little bit fluid for me. Um, I wanted to coach Maddie through that situation, but I had to realize I'm not her medication coach. I needed to find somebody who could help us deal with that very real and wean her slowly so that we didn't fall into the darkness of never coming back. I had to help my wife relocate to a place she didn't want to live anymore from a place she loved, which put an incredible stress on my marriage, um, and was a very hard time for us as a couple. My son, who did benefit from it slightly because he benefited from coming back and getting some vitamin D, but nonetheless, it was his junior year of high school, and so that's a time in your life where your change isn't always an easy thing to handle. All of that happened, and I had to decide, am I a coach in this situation or am I a husband and a father and someone who genuinely cares about recognizing that I can't solution all of this. I'm gonna need some support systems. That was a horrible season to be in from a practical standpoint, but it mentally prepared me for a couple of things that I couldn't have seen coming. Um, and I mentioned COVID, that was real for all of us, but I think I was emotionally in a better place. I think I was a more empathetic coach with my clients and with other people around me because I had already had my tail handed to me and was having to course correct and needed very much help finding my true north. So when I'm coaching during the COVID season and Maddie's getting some stability back and we're kind of reorienting to Scottsdale, suddenly, my family gets to hear me in the back room on my coaching calls and they don't hear the details. They just hear dad's animated voice because he's on Zoom all the time. And that was the moment when I think it clicked for them what I really do. Because I've been so, I guess, trained to I'm like a professional priest. Like what happens in a coaching call stays in the booth. Well, now I'm walking out to get a, glass of water or a sandwich at lunchtime and they're like, "Oh, now I think I finally know what you do. You're kind of like a priest, a therapist, like you they put all these words to what I did and suddenly they realized, oh, yeah, you really do work hard to be dad. You're not like now that I've seen all that, you're not trying to overcoach us. There are times when they have to say, okay, Coach Regan, like be dad right now.
Chill.
But I think they saw the level of complexity of what my day typically looks like with clients, and they realized, wow, you really work hard to just be dad when it's time to be dad, or to be Michael when it's time to be husband or friend. And that was affirming to me because I live in my own little echo chamber and we all need feedback. It's one of the things I value as a coach is getting outside input. And I think that season, we talk about lessons from last time. These are more recent times. That season really changed me too. And I think that's why I was so appreciative of your transparency in 2020 was it was almost like I had been prepared to know how to handle that. That didn't throw me off guard. If anything, that caused me to think I'll always be friends with Ken Perry.
Yeah. That's, I can't imagine going through what you went through and then having to be there for somebody on a coaching call. Like that just seems, you wake up and you're like, the last thing I want to do is hear other people's problems when I've got this going on.
And yet, I hear this. You didn't specifically say this, and I hear it in your story as well. And I even see it in my own story. As I think it was Elizabeth Elliot, after she lost two husbands, was asked at a speech one time, "What do you do when your first husband's gone, your second husband just died of cancer? What do you do?" And she said, "You do the next thing." And that's all you can do sometimes, is the next thing. And it might be the laundry, it might be making a sandwich, it might be whatever. You just do the next thing. I got to tell you, Michael, it's been a treat having you here, because you are one of those congruent people. You are who you are. And it's one of the reasons I've always been drawn to you. We haven't seen each other for a while, and we reconnected in Vegas at Momentum Builders. And it's just so much fun to have you here, because you're just Michael Regan. You're just that guy. And you don't try to be anything different than what you are. And I think it serves you beautifully just as a human being, but it also serves you beautifully in your capacity as a coach. If people wanted to get a hold of you or find out more about you, your coaching, or building champions, how would they go about doing that?
Yeah, the best place to find out about Building Champions is going to be buildingchampions.com. They'll have information about me on their profile page. I also have a personal Coach Michael Regan page of my own. They can find me there, and that'll give them contact info. And then we've launched our Building Bigger Lives podcast. So go find us on YouTube at Building Bigger Lives, or we have an Instagram page to post a lot of our episodes, and we're on Apple Podcasts every Wednesday with a new episode. It's been a great outlet for me to share some of the coaching experiences I've had in a context in which I can really break down the game film. So any of those are great places to reach me, and it's been a pleasure being with the both of you today.
I've got one more question for you. If you were to go back to 10-year-old Michael Regan, that little kid running around, and you were to give 10-year-old Michael Regan one piece of advice based on everything you've experienced in your career, in your life, what would that piece of advice be?
So I'm a child of the 70s, born in the 60s, but really reared in the 70s. And there was a great song in the 70s. Do you remember Hold On Loosely, But Don't Let Go? If you cling too tightly,
you lose control.
I wish someone had told me that as a young man. I was very uptight as a young man. I found out later, taking a disc profile, I have a high C. So guess what? I like things in a certain order. My sister and my cousin would walk into 10-year-old Michael's room and just move something on the shelf just to see if I would notice and annoy me. I was very uptight. I think I was well liked by people, but they all knew, like, don't push his buttons. He likes things a certain way. And I have spent a lot of my adult life having to hold things loosely, because that's the reality of life. I wish someone could have told me, just hold on loosely. Don't let go. If you cling too tightly, you're going to lose control.
I love it.
It's a pretty perfect way to end this one.
It is.
Gratitude, my friend.
Thank
Much
you, brother.
gratitude.
Same. Love being here with you. Hope we can return it on Building Bigger Lives at a later date.